Strengthening your core can be a challenge, to say the least. There's a lot of different nuances that happen with it. There's a lot of things going on because there's a lot of different muscles that play a role into your core. We're going to focus more on the abdominal muscles of your core with this, and mostly your abdominal muscles of your core. And we're going to go over three main mistakes that I see a ton that can be super detrimental to strengthening your core and also applying that strength to other exercises like the squat, the deadlift, and just life in general. So come along and let's go over these three mistakes. The first one is kind of how you're turning on your core, how you're turning on your abs. Do you suck in? Do you bring your belly button to your spine like you've been told so many times in the past from so many different classes and so many different instructors? Well, how does that actually help you? How does this actually work? Well, if you're wanting to turn on or activate your core, then you want the muscles to actually contract, right? That's kind of how you make your muscle work. I'm going to contract my bicep, and so as you see it, it gets larger, it's shortening as it's doing that contraction. Well, if I'm wanting to turn on my abdominal muscles, I want them to shorten. I want them to come together and contract in that, enlarge a little bit in that. And so instead of thinking about that you want to bring your belly button to your spine or you want to just tip your hips backwards, I want you to think about more of making your cylinder of your core whole. We don't want to dent your cylinder. Have you ever dented a can? It makes it so much easier to actually smush. If you have a can that's not dented, then it's harder to smush with your hands. If you're going to smush a can with your hands, what do you do first? You dent it. And so whenever we're thinking about being strong through our core, strong through our abs, actually working these muscles, then why would we suck in and almost cave in, dent one side of it? Same thing as if you see your ribs flaring out, then that means that you're not actually contracting your abdominal muscles. You're not bringing your pelvis to your rib cage and solidifying that front part of your cylinder. This part of the cylinder is key for controlling and kind of being the other base of support, front and back, for your cylinder. We need both of them to work together in this. And so we need you to not dent or cave in the front part of your cylinder. We want you to think about flattening your cylinder, flattening that side, being a solid base on that side. And so one way that you can actually work on this is you take a deep breath in and then breathe it out pretty forcefully through a small hole in your mouth, or actually grab a straw and breathe out through that straw. This forces you to force your air out of your mouth, and your external and internal obliques are accessory breathing muscles. As you force that air out, you then bring in and solidify the front part of your stomach. You contract it. You make it flat and you make it strong on the front part. This can help you with understanding the difference between sucking in versus tightening and contracting your abdominal muscles to help you gain a better control of your pelvic floor coming up, your abdominal muscles coming together, both top and bottom, and also side to side, and keeping those ribs down with it because your abdominal muscles connect up to your rib cage. And that's why it matters. If you're flaring your ribs, then you're not contracting those abs enough to hold that pressure and to hold that stability that you need in your trunk. Number two comes into doing exercises that are a little bit hard for you, or that you've learned such a patterning in that you are using your hip flexors instead of your lower abdominal muscles. It comes into play if you have back pain. It comes into play if you have hip flexor pain. They're never loose. They're always tight. You feel them during any core exercise, during your squats, during your deadlifts, during pretty much all of your other exercises. Your hip flexors start to come up and say, hey, we're tight, we're tired, and you find yourself stretching them a whole lot. Well, it may not be that you just need to stretch them You probably still do, but it's not the answer you're looking for. The answer you're looking for is that you're actually doing your other exercises incorrectly. You are using your hip flexors to try to hold stability of your pelvis and also your thighs. This comes into play whenever you're doing any leg reaches, when you're doing those squats, because you need stability in your trunk to then press up out of the squat and also to come down into it. And you also need this in your deadlift because your deadlift is a huge core exercise whenever you think about the mechanics of it, that you are bending over and you have that pressure on your back that you now need to pull the weight up and to get out of that hinge. It's a really strong core exercise there. Well, if you're using your hip flexors instead, then you're lacking in the ability to strengthen your lower core. You put more stress on your back because that's where your hip flexors actually connect, is your low back and also your pelvis, and goes down to your femur, your thigh bone. And this comes into play because they're not meant to hold that long of contraction for an endurance type event. They can do it here and there, but they're not meant to do it over long periods of time. They're also not meant to hold the trunk stability while you're doing other exercises that they might need to be working in a different capacity. And so it's kind of fighting that I need to move my leg and stabilize that to I need to move and stabilize my trunk and my pelvis. And so they end up doing too much and they overwork in this. But if you back off some of your core exercises, do an easier core exercise, kind of retrain your brain, it's not that you can't do the other ones, it's that you have to convince your brain that I need to do it in this type of patterning instead of that type of patterning where you're using your hip flexors a whole lot for it. You may also need to do some foam rolling to your hips to help you with kind of chilling them out a little bit as you're doing some of this. The bent knee followed is a great exercise to kind of retrain your brain, and so is some of the kind of knee up plank or the bear crawl type plank. You're going to be using a lot of your core, lower core especially, to help you get into that position and move around. Number three kind of goes into number two, but it's that you are tightening up everything. You can't actually just use your core, use your abdominal muscles. You have to tighten up your back, you have to tighten up your neck, your shoulders want to come up and help you stabilize, and you just feel everything gets tight. And this comes into play because it's not functional for you. It's not actually helping you to move forward, to use this for your squats, to use this for your deadlifts, to use this for your biking, your hiking, your other activities, because one, whenever you do that, you typically don't breathe. You're doing a Valsalva maneuver whenever it's not a needed Valsalva maneuver. Now, if you're doing a really heavy squat pattern or you're doing a really heavy deadlift pattern, then you may need to do a Valsalva and hold that pressure there as you complete the actual exercise move. But when I'm doing different core exercises, I should be able to breathe during it. When you're doing hiking or biking or any other type of exercise, then you should be able to breathe as you're doing it, as you're holding and making sure you have core and trunk stability. And so if you don't train that way, where you're tightening up everything, then when you need this and you're on the trails or doing something else that you enjoy, running, then you're going to start tightening up everything. This leads to other neck issues. This leads to shoulder issues. This leads to other hip issues because your body's not used to this patterning of letting other things go and holding stability in your trunk. And you have to train that way to be able to use it the best whenever you're doing the other things that you love to do. Whenever you're wanting to be stronger, when you're wanting to look good. When I tighten up my core, I don't want to be here and be so tight everywhere else. And so again, take a step back, retrain your body's natural inclination, use a pillow underneath your head, and slowly bump yourself back up to some of the harder exercises so you can do it without tightening up everything and breathing while you're doing it. I hope this helps with giving you some things to not do, make sure you're not doing, and some things to do to help you reverse this and move forward. If you want to check out a program for different workouts, check out the link below or send me a message, and I'd love to hear if this is helpful for you. Cheers, y'all.